everyone. Welcome to the new episode of Future of Cloud Optimization. Today, I have Varsha Sundar with me, VP of Cloud FinOps. Varsha, welcome to the show. Just a little bit of a background and your journey in FinOps.
Sure. Thank you for providing me this opportunity. So my journey as cloud, in cloud FinOps as senior cloud optimization engineer started end of 2021. So I started this role at Prudential, and then I moved on to Experian as senior cloud FinOps manager, and currently I'm vice president of cloud FinOps at Chubb. So when I started this role, it was a brand new role to me. Prior to that, I was a data engineer. Even before that, I was a network engineer. So what happened was it was a brand new role, and I was like, it was very challenging, and I love challenges. So I started this role, and my first optimization opportunity were, converted from potential to realized savings for about like $1.3 million a year. So that was my first gig and I succeeded. So that kept motivating me. And yes, I did have a lot of challenges, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But that's about me. Apart from work, my personal life, I'm a mother of two. I'm a new mom. So I have like a 4-month-old now. And then you will see me cooking a lot of times in the kitchen, or you would see me traveling.
I'm a father of three, so mother of two. Yeah, I quickly learned the ropes of being a parent, so that's fun. That's the most fun part. What do you think is the role of FinOps in a company like Chubb, or for that matter, any company that's into that modernization journey?
So FinOps plays a vital role, right? So like how we have engineers, operation folks, and then we have business and clients and users. So what happens is most enterprises either have used to have cloud first or cloud enabled. So when they start this journey, it's all about, hey, let's make use of the cloud, let's get into the cloud, and then like everything, architecture, everything is like quick, quick, quick. Oh, this works. Okay, this is there, and then a year later, or for that matter, 2 years later, it blows up. Budgets go up, and then people are like, "Hey, where are we headed? Like, how come this was our budget? Where are we going? Why are we going in this direction?" Right. So what happens is when a FinOps role is very critical, not because somebody comes in and looks at, "Hey, this is the bill," and things like that. It's more about, like you mentioned, optimization, modernization. Say, for example, you have this old EC2 or T2s running, but they've been running and running. Did somebody upgrade it? Are we looking at the new EC2 instance types? Are they like out of service? Are we still using those kind of out of service instances? Are they spinning 24 bar 7? Are we looking at the architecture the right way even before the projects get onboarded, right? So there's a cloud business office where you look at cloud intakes, where you validate, you verify, you ensure that all the guidance and governance are being followed. And being a FinOps person, right, you just don't deal with, engineers or, operations or clients or finance. It's like as a whole, building that culture, making a cultural shift, like making everybody aware that whatever you're responsible for what you're spinning in the cloud.
When you stepped into this role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two things generally come to people. One, the challenge is in there, and the second is like the quick first few accomplishments, right? What would be the second aspect of it? Quick accomplishments.
So as everybody says, it's easy, right sizing, shutting off instances, doing like a start stop, 9 to 5 operational model, business enablement operational models. Then you have the sunset model, right? Like, for example, an engineer in the US works at a certain time, but then it's followed by somebody in the other side of the globe, working. So are we optimizing based on the timings? Like, are we running it 24 bar 7? And then we look at termination of instances, like bringing up databases, but not spinning too much, or using auto scaling. Those are some of the quick wins, right? And then looking at services, Where do we really need them or not? Is this cloud first? Are we like benefiting because we are getting into the cloud, or are we just doing a lift and shift? Are we doing, like you mentioned, modernization? Are we just taking it and putting it in the cloud? Or are we like rethinking, rewiring, or are we like looking ahead, looking at the future? Are we, sometimes licenses play a vital role, right? So are we using a hub if you're in Microsoft? So those are some of the initial quick wins. And logs, are we logging everything into the cloud? Are we like storing all the data into cloud? Are we using lifecycle policies? They could be abandoned instances, abandoned block volume, storages. So are we taking care of those? Do we have guardrails? Do we have governance?
Sorry. Do you envision to have a tool in place to manage this, or do you envision a team going after these things?
I would say both. At this, if you ask me today, I would say both. Initially, I think when the whole FinOps concept started, it was manual. Folks, there was a team or a single person who, depending on the spend of the enterprise, right? They would look at it, look at the bills every month. It wouldn't be like, hey, I'm looking at the bill today. Maybe I would look at the bill next week, or it would be month to month. It's not like immediate, right? So it's more like detection. You're trying to stop the bleed, but you're not avoiding. So that's the initial part. And when we have tools, it's like you detect it immediately when there's anomalies, right? You get notified, and then you immediately take actions. So it's both ways. I think a mixture would be, from my preference, is to have both, have the tools and have humans looking at it.
And when it comes to balancing performance availability with cost optimization, right? At times, when you optimize for cost, you might lose visibility into or lose focus on the other two. And engineers, as I believe, they don't like it that much, right? So how do you balance it?
You're right. That's one of the challenges I think most of us face, right? Convincing your engineer. Performance is a KPI, availability, resilience is a KPI, but cost is also equally important. It's also a big factor, right? Day-to-day factor when you look at it, because I know they would be under pressure to spin up some of the architecture to have it ready, because there could be like production deadlines or enablement deadlines. But are we looking at the cost? Because cost also plays a vital role. Like you said, somebody could spin a smaller, we could say, hey, right size it to this particular instance, but then the project or application may not be taking that as an input. They might need a bigger volume per the architecture, right? So otherwise it'll impact the performance. So my suggestion or has always been, in production, like if this is what the architecture needs, or this is what we're going to go with, that's fine, because we all understand there's an exception in place. We have an exception in place because everybody is aware of the cost. It's not like you did the pricing initially, there's a budget of so much, but then you have to consider that, hey, this might cost a little bit more, or we are aware that we would be incurring more cost because we need performance. But when you have a DR environment or lower environments, right? Why would we spin up the exact replica? Because they are lower environments. So why, those areas we can start testing, or we can start having backups in a more cost efficient application architecture, than to go full bloom, like have an exact replica of the production environment. What I've noticed in my career in FinOps is people are a bit hesitant or edgy to have a smaller or like a most cost optimized environment in development, because the counter argument is, hey, if my production goes down, I need to like make sure everything is there in my DR, or my backup is coming up pretty quickly. So that is where I would say, like, thinking ahead, modernizing better, having a better architecture helps.
So like an actively standing by. Got it. Got it. On the tool side, right? So when you have something that can, so this is how I generally see the platform, right? If you have a lot of people with significant knowledge on the finance side, and you have a crowd that has significant knowledge on the engineering side, right? And now bridging that is probably the recipe to success. So what I see is if there is a tool that can take input from both of you, best of both worlds, right? Bring it together. Like where, Varsha, you can go in and say, these are the five things that is smart from a finance standpoint, and engineers can go in and say, yes, Varsha is right. But these are the two things that I want in addition to what she has configured. With such a platform, and then it takes these two inputs, like preferences from humans, right? And if that platform can take those inputs and then use its model to refine those inputs and run with it, would it be a good idea? Like a platform that can take inputs, refine it, make it safe, and run with it.
We are entering into the world of AI, aren't we?
Yes, yes.
Definitely, yeah. Having a foundational model, right, and then fine tuning it based off the usage, and then having it, like available, that would be great. Having such a tooling or such a model where where a machine learning model or a deep learning model where it takes in looks at the build for your curated environments,
Yeah.
and then spitting out suggestions, right? So, a foundation model that takes in your billing data, analyzes your history because it's very easy, right? It should be being trained on these billing, and then saying, hey, these are the five services that you need to look at, and these are the engineering type of changes that needs to be made, and this is the cost that would be saved. That would be great. I think when we have that, most of us will be out of jobs.
In fact, I have an argument against that too. So if an AI can program you out of the job, you should not have that job in the first place, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it's not even possible to take human out of their job. It is probably easy to make their job a lot better, right? So I'm thinking you generally love having challenge from a financial, creational, creativity standpoint than like cleaning up and doing stuff, right? So that's quite boring for you. Engineers love doing their stuff, right? And now if there's a system that can take this mundane task, the toil, from both your jobs and do it on your behalf, that makes you both happy. So that's how generally I see AI.
Yeah, to take it a step ahead, right? Not just do it, have the governance in place, and then take it and then like finish the cycle, right? Like you found the problem, you're making these changes, and then add it to governance, add the policies. So this way, you're stopping, at the entry level, you're cutting the charge or like the spikes.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Now, when it comes to AI in autonomous or AI or autonomous or cloud management in general, have you implemented anything or do you have a first-hand experience of doing anything in your current job?
Not a first-hand experience, but I would love to. I was reading about it. Definitely, there is a lot of opportunity with AI in FinOps. So, in fact, one of the ideas is to, my personal idea is to have a bot, right? Like have all the AI tooling, all the offerings of AWS, and then have it in your company where you know the common questions are like, hey, how much, what would I be charged? Like, what is the estimation, right? Because as a FinOps or as a cloud engineer, or you understand the terminologies, you understand how things work. But when it's your customer, right, and they're all getting onboarded for the first time, the question that's always been asked is, hey, how much would it be, or what would be the budget in cloud compared to what I have today at on-prem? Because at one point we'll be spinning up both, and eventually on-prem will goes down, right? So those kinds of questions, if your bot is able to answer, or your chatbot, like one question and answers for you, that would be great. And it's not just that, right? It's like, okay, here is your, if you feed in your architecture or say, I want this, or this is my existing architecture, you get a response saying, hey, this is the kind of architecture you should have in the cloud with all the modernized, um, you know, modernization put in place, and then have like 2-3 options or like pricing models. That would be great, because you take that, it's auto approved, like and then we take it to the engineers to make sure it's
Exactly.
given the governance, this is possible, and then you just go ahead and it goes in, and like you mentioned, a tool that does it for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's really key. Perfect, perfect. And do you often see SLA violations when you try to optimize, or SLA or SLO violations?
SLA violations, definitely. So what happens is some of the cloud providers, right? When it comes to SLA, what I've noticed is something goes down, your service has gone down, right? And there is a SLA violations. And then now it's time for chargeback. But what I've seen or noticed is it doesn't come automatically. So you need to request a credit for SLA. So the first step for that is to actually submit a request, right? Because submit a case. And sometimes the wait is 60 days and then the whole process starts. And because you need to, there's like a, I think, business case period where you got to wait to make sure like there's some back end verification. And then there's the process where internally there is a review, and then as customers we have to provide certain data on certain calculations. And mind you, these are all for just the services that went down. So for example, if I have an application and I have XYZ service that goes down, and my connected services also get affected because the whole application is down, and I lose, like, for example, $2 million, the SLA won't give me $2 million, right? It would just, the SLA credit would be just for that particular service that went down. And even to get that SLA credit, it's going to take some time. So basically, you're losing a lot of money, and the process is lengthy. So like you mentioned, right, having an AI look at it and then follow up and get the credit back, and also compute what other services are getting affected on your end, and then submitting it. I would love to have that model. And I think I'll be the first person to, like, utilize it.
Got it. That makes perfect sense to me. You have worked with almost all significant portions of FinOps technologies. Right? I'm sure you've worked with Zesty, you've worked with few Apptio, you've worked with a few cloud tools, like generally with the whole industry.
Mhm.
So what are the key features you think it's missing or you wish it had? And what are the things that you would ask one of us, like vendors, to develop?
Right. A good one. I was waiting that somebody would ask me this question. So this is how I see it, right? Like, each vendor has something unique to offer, like their unique selling point, right? So for example, Zesty does RI and saving reservations for you on your behalf. And then Aptio or IBM, currently they're IBM, right? They have this very nice CCM tool, cost management tool. And there are others, right? Like VMware now has Cloud Health. But to me, there isn't one tool that does most of it, like have fix the tags, help with all the engineering, architectural, work, and then do linting or governance, right? And then cloud formation, like on your behalf, and then also manage savings plans and RIs for you. So it's like, if you look at all these vendors, they have one unique selling point, like each one. So it would be nice to take all their unique selling points and have
One tool.
one tool that fixes everything. And also, if you look at most of these tools, right, they would either be like one service provider based focused, or like three or five, but not all service provider focused.
So bringing the best of all worlds, in other words.
And have that FinOps lens to it.
Generally, when you talk about these large tools, if there is your AI bot that you were talking about right before, if that AI bot does all the work, right, or all the work that it can finish, and throw the rest back at you, right? Whatever I could do, I completed. But now, Varsha, these are the 5 things that I could not do. Now I need your help, right? Rather than combining all these tools, if you can think of the other way around, would you be supportive of that? Either you will have to live without ST, but do some manual work there. Live without cloudability, do some manual work there. But your bot will do most stuff.
Isn't that nice? Sometimes a little change and then see how the model works.
You're generally supportive of that idea. Is my read.
Yeah, I think we currently we're doing this way, and then wouldn't it be nice to do the other way and see what works, and then we can fine tune it both further, right?
So as a company, as a person, what I believe in is try to do things that are super boring for humans to do without them. And now surface up other things that your system cannot do because AI cannot really do everything, right? And it makes a lot of mistakes if it tries to do everything. But rather than you starting from the top, we start from the bottom, where we say, no, let me do the cleanup. Then I'll tell you when I'm done. Now you know there are like 10 things that the system is not smart enough to handle, which he wants your help. Now, rather than combining this tool, now you have a little bit of everything there, but you can kind of get it done in little time.
Right. And also, who knows, right? These vendors would switch their model, and those little things that the bot cannot do, or the foundation model cannot do, might have these vendors doing it for you. So the whole model changes now, right? Currently, it's like each company or each vendor has their own USP. Now, the foundation model, the bot does it, and then it says, "Hey, these are my limitations." Now we take those limitations and have vendors build their product based off those limitations, knowing that AI has these limitations. Because at this point, we're not sure what limitations AI has.
Evolution of FinOps. Now you know that you've seen it right from the start. FinOps is somewhere. Now, how do you see the evolution going forward? How do you think it's going to evolve?
Good question. I've been reading, and I'm a FinOps Foundation active ambassador as well, North American ambassador. So what I've seen so far, like 3 years ago, FinOps Foundation was so small, like small mini current compared to what it is today, right? And then I think like last year and the year before, it was it became like, oh, FinOps. Yes, we know what FinOps is. Like, oh, cloud FinOps. Oh, it's a big role. And if you see, the job market had like a lot of openings, but very few people with that, niche skill set, right? And then FinOps became like part of your cloud journey. Like every company realized having a FinOps person or FinOps team is core. And then now there was like a lot of awareness. A lot more people started getting into the FinOps area and trying to understand. So it's not just one role, right? Oh, you're a finance person, so you can become a FinOps practitioner, or you're like an engineer, you become a FinOps practitioner. It's like you need to have an idea of everything, right? This, and that, because you need to communicate with different teams, and all the teams put together are are marching towards the success of not only cost reduction, but also performance, having modernization as a whole, and thinking forward, looking ahead. So currently, where FinOps foundation is headed, like they're focused more on focus, which is like trying to standardize all the billing, because different CSPs have their own way of billing or their own terminologies, right? Having a standard and using that as a plugin. It could be a vendor plugging in, or it could be enterprise taking that and plugging in and having a standard report or a dashboard, right? That, and then also AI. So a lot of work is being put, and a lot of folks are actively trying to build that foundational model that we were talking about, right? So I think that is where FinOps is headed. And I did read like a couple of articles or folks saying, oh, this is end of FinOps. I don't think this is an end of FinOps area. Maybe there is a little bit of a valley, but it's not, the slope has come down, or the growth has come down a little. But that doesn't mean it's the end, because having somebody or tools to look at how your customized environment is challenging, and that isn't going to go away.
So, Varsha, this is something that I thought, right? So, generally, with this cloud providers, they are starting to build some of these FinOps concepts, right? You can see compute optimizer. You can now see cost optimization in general as a theme for almost all these clouds. They are very supportive of you saving the money, which is the right thing for them to do. I also see that technically, from an engineering standpoint, cluster management, there were like, let's say 80 companies trying to optimize Kubernetes cost. And AWS, in the last chain when announced, it's going to be auto mode, no more cleanup required. So it's done. So ideally, what essentially will happen the next is those 80 companies are almost dead in the water, right? They cannot do anything because now the provider themselves is doing. Why would you need Kubernetes optimization platform. You don't, right? You need app optimization, which is where we play it, but you don't need infrastructure Kubernetes optimization because they can do it, right? Now there are some significant players that I'm not even talking about very small companies, right? It's the same with GCP. It's going to be the same with AKS. It's very clear. That's where everything is going. Now, if you look at the cost optimization side, they're providing you reporting and screens, or they're starting to provide reports and screens.
Right.
On infrastructure optimization, they are giving you the functionality with auto mode and autopilot and things of that nature. So now with all these providers themselves kind of realizing their gaps and filling it and making it easier for you, what is ideally the next thing for FinOps?
Right. I agree. But if you see, they're focused only on their product, right? Your enterprise may not be having just one CSP. I worked in an enterprise that had 5. So each enterprise is focusing on theirs, but within the company, you're not looking at just one cloud service provider. You're looking your cost optimization as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. And some of these, like you mentioned, big companies, they might be using Kubernetes, right? But that's not the only service that they're using.
I see.
So basically, it's Kubernetes, but underneath those Kubernetes, there are other services that gets linked to it. And the service provider is not looking at all of those, right? The company is just focused on one service and one area of the service. For example, I think AWS offers more than 200 or 250 plus services, right? Like the numbers keep going every year So they have to focus on each and every service and the different parameters or
optimization parameters. That makes sense.
Right.
So basically, a least common denominator problem for Kubernetes, you're almost thinking that it's done, it's dead. Now, but if you consider the whole service, let's say ECS and Lambda and other things in play, there is no one system that can do everything. So the companies that are doing everything should serve. Okay, I kind of agree with you. Yes.
And also to add to your point, right? They do have these reports, beautiful reports, dashboards, which are which are great because it's their product, so they know the nuances. But what happens if I'm a multi-cloud
So that's where it becomes a little challenging. I get it. When it comes to taking that feature from the vendor, for example, Kubernetes optimization, and let's assume you use AWS. Let's not even connect to it, but let's assume you use AWS. Would you prefer using AWS auto mode, which is optimizing cost in their way, or using a vendor?
I would say it depends on what your purpose is, right? What your apps are, what your vision is. Because I've seen both, like just based off using vendor product or, by, the company itself, right? AWS at this context, we're talking about AWS. So I would say start with AWS, their guidance, because they are the pioneers of that service, right? And they know the service in and out. So they would have certain directions or guidance, right? They have very good documentation. So start there and then see how much you can optimize, and then use the vendor and see how much more or what more recommendations you're getting, and then go ahead with it. Or if you are like, oh, I need to get this done, or I don't have enough bandwidth, or I don't have enough people or resources, then I would say start with the vendor, see how much or what they're trying to give you or guidance and the architecture, and start from there, and then build on top of it. It really depends on what level your enterprise is and how much funding and how much resources you have at hand.
Even being a vendor, I would say trust AWS. So if AWS says they can optimize, I think they are the best. So if they say that, right, it's a large company and they know what they're doing. I think if you're using a vendor just for optimizing your Kubernetes cluster, it's time for you to rethink and stop. Is my take on it.
It also depends on
what you're essentially doing.
Yeah, what you're doing with and resources and also your deadlines, right? Basically, you're racing against a deadline.
Now, back to the career advice, right? So let's say someone is trying to build their career on FinOps, and I know you've already built yours. What is the advice you would give to a newbie?
As a FinOps practitioner,
Mhm.
it's not just right sizing, or it's not like, hey, looking up at the AWS tool or looking up at these vendor tools and saying, oh, right size this or right size that. It's compute or storage. It's a lot more or than that. It's things beyond that. How much can you optimize beyond that? And
Mhm.
not all these recommendations work in your organization. So be aware of that
Mhm.
and get your hands dirty.
Mhm.
Uh, Being a FinOps practitioner, right? It's not enough to say, hey, you can save so much money. I would say get your hands dirty, build a business case before you go to engineers or business. You test it, have your playground, test it by yourself, like have a theory, do all the math, you know, make sure you perform those tests, like parameters, it changes, and then go and then have your discussions. Because it's one thing to say, hey, do this, you'll save so much, but it's another thing to say, this is what my recommend. I mean, this is where I start, like how you can, your potential savings, and this is what I did. And you will also understand. It's like putting your theory into test, right? Like you will also understand where there is going to be a lot of work that needs to be done by the research, like engineering team, or your business, and the impact. And like you mentioned, right, like how much of the performance are we looking at? Like, are we getting 100%, or are we like losing some performance? Are we optimizing enough? How is the speed, like RTAs? So those are the things that I would say, because I've mentored interns. So first thing I say is, it's not about knowing what the service is, it's also understanding what the billing is for those services, what adds up to that billing.
Let's say there was a cloud Olympics, right? So, and there was one segment that you think you would dominate. What would be that?
I think I would dominate in talks. I mean, just joking. So one place where I would dominate is definitely understanding, what services are, and what do those service bills contribute to. So, for example, EFS, right? Like, well, that was one of my initial services that I had worked on. There are two modes to EFS: provisioning
Mhm.
and bursting. And if somebody sets the default in provision throughput as the max, people spend
Mm.
$6,000 a month in certain regions, and certain regions $12,000. So making sure there's setting up governance, looking at what contributes to the bill. I think that's where I would shine, because that's the first thing that I always look at. Like, okay, this service is having spending so much. What is leading to that, number, the spend number, and then the components, and understanding why we are using those, or what is the idea behind that architecture.
Got it. And what skills do you require? So let's for a newbie again. What exactly should they do or want to do to get there?
Having the ability to analyze, being curious, like not sitting there, oh, okay, these services. No, it's like going in, deep dive, understand, looking back, analyzing those numbers, analyzing the history, trying to, getting your hands dirty. It's not like, oh, here's the bill. This is what I see on my tool, or this is what I see on my dashboard, or this is what is contributing, right? It's more about, okay, this is contributing. I know this, and this. Now, let's think beyond, why are we doing this? Can we optimize? Can we modernize? Like having that knowledge, reading through those services, and putting that into test, making changes, bringing that cultural change, right? Those are the qualities that you should have to succeed being a FinOps practitioner.
So, Varsha, also can you guide us through the steps that you generally follow when you see an optimization path, especially involving engineering? So you find an opportunity, then what else? What exactly do you do next?
So you find the opportunity. So even to get find the opportunity, I always, like, I'm constantly looking at the bill every other day, right? And then you find this opportunity. Then I would read about that service, at a high level, understand what the components are or what the service is. Because like I said, there's so many services and I may, as a practitioner, I may not know all the service, right? Understanding the service and connected components to that service. And then the next thing I would do is I would look at how are we doing? Do we have like non-prod and prod environments? How is the spend like? And I would go with, okay, now I've identified this opportunity and I know this is the potential savings. Now, what will happen or what are the steps needed to convert them into realized savings, right? So I would go spin up the same environment or the same setup in a sandbox, play around with it, see what changes I can make, and then it's like I mentioned before, putting my theory into test and understanding what changes or how much can we change or what can be done or is it even viable. Once that's done, you document those experiment outputs, right? Your POC outputs. It's like a proof of concept that you can always put forward because you have more. It's like being like a scientist. You have all the data with you. Next, you go and you don't take it and go, hey, this is what I did and this is the savings. It's more like I'm trying to understand the other person's perspective, right? Talk to engineering, understand why a certain, architecture was provided or why that particular service was spun up in a certain way. What was the business requirement? Once you have that input, then you go and have a discussion with the business and then see what their perspective was. Because sometimes what happens is, like I said, people are racing against deadline and then they put something in place. And then now they might be open to modernizing those services or bringing down those services to a level where your performance is fine, but you're also saving money because whatever savings they do, they can use it in their future projects, right? It's like you have budgets for doing more things or budgets for all your applications that are on hold. So you're freeing some money and some resources for it. So test it at a lower environment, convince them and work with your business, engineering, SRE, and then try to change in the lower environment and see if it's impacting in a non-prod environment. If not, then you move ahead with making those changes in production environment for one application in one particular business unit. So once that goes in place, people have confidence now, right? Like initially you were like just looking at the numbers and they were just looking at what you have done. Now they're seeing it on the ground, like at a ground level, like, yes, this works for my application in a lower environment. So now they're confident enough to make those changes in production environment. And once it goes into production environment, now you have this one particular application, one particular business unit. Now you can expand it at an enterprise level, right? You can have 3, 4 other business units or using similar services to make those changes. And then once that goes in place, then the next step is you've detected, you've prevented, you've done detection, you've stopped the bleeding. The next step is prevention. Have guardrails set in place, have like config to see if there is one-offs, right? And once there is, you immediately get alerted and go back and make those changes. It's like a cycle. You start, you detect, you prevent, and then you have governance. But that doesn't mean you're done with that service. You have to go back and again visit the same service sometime in the future. Because like I said, new services come in, new versions come in, better optimized, all these service providers come up with better optimized chips, better optimized, next version. So, are you like lagging in your versions? Can you upgrade them to a newer version? So, for example, Glue, right? Glue 3.0 has auto scaling, but prior to that, they didn't have auto scaling. So people had to guess the number for their jobs. But now, because you have auto scaling, if you implement those, right, you're saving money. But at the same time, your performance may not have an impact.
Thank you very much, Varsha. In fact, thank you so much for all the valuable insights. It was super fun having you on this show. And I'm sure all of us will benefit from the conversation as well.
Thank you, Suresh, for this wonderful opportunity. Yes, and if somebody is new and they want to start, you can go to finops.org and you'll have tons and tons of material to look at. And then I would recommend doing certification in whatever cloud service provider you're working today. There's like practitioner where you can start with FinOps practitioner certs where you can actually like start taking those courses and get yourself certified. So this way you're aware of the fundamentals as a FinOps practitioner. It's a beginning for your Spark. So that's something that I would recommend for newbies.
Sounds good. Thank you so very much.